This is Vision OS.
Today, we're going to talk about the metaverse.
Imagine a future VR/AR headset where you're using your brain to control everything.
In the ever-advancing world of technology, the future of virtual reality and augmented reality holds boundless promise. VR is redefining entertainment and education, offering the ability to walk through history or game with friends in fully immersive virtual environments. AR, on the other hand, is transforming work across various fields, enabling surgeons to access real-time data during surgery and architects to visualize designs on site. The future of VR and AR is unfolding before our eyes, and it's a future filled with limitless possibilities, where the boundaries between the physical and digital worlds blur more than ever. Join us as we interview Paul Tomlinson, a creative scientist at Mural.
Well, I guess we can get started. ptom, thank you for joining us, and everyone, welcome back to the Base Level Podcast. I'm Jonathan Marcel. I'm here with my co-host and really good friend, Christian Tate Lerma, and we are joined by Paul Tomlinson. He is I would say a good friend of mine. We actually met through work, and we had some really great discussions on virtual reality, augmented reality, physics, particle physics, anything you can think of while we worked together. Recently, ptom made a jump to a new company, which we'll talk about a little bit more, that's exploring the virtual reality space and really doing some fantastic work. But, I can't even put it into words. So ptom, can you describe who you are and what you do and, how you got into the world of virtual reality?
So I go by ptom, which is just a really short version of my username. I am a nerd. I'm fascinated by everything, and it's a compulsion of fascination that you can't turn off, right? I'm happy to sit and look at the detail of any and everything and find it endlessly fascinating. I have been working full-time in VR for over 4 years now. And that was not working like Minority Report style. It was, keyboard and mouse, but VR was my screens. I put up giant screens. Like my main work screen is about 25 feet on the diagonal. So, you're talking about 24-inch or 32-inch monitors. Yeah, this is 25 feet. And that's one of four that I use. So I got into that because I did not have enough screens or enough real estate on my desk to fit all of the stuff that I needed to see for the problems I was trying to solve. Right. So you're looking at your database, you're looking at your code, you're looking at the documents, you're looking at your input, your output, your debug trace, and you want to have all of that context for debugging some work or trying to insert a new feature into these complex systems. And when I say complex systems, I mean these are responsible for moving tens of billions of dollars a month of somebody else's money. So not anything that you can afford to get wrong. And there's a lot of rules that go into that. So trying to do delicate surgery on financially responsible code meant that I needed to see all of this stuff because my working memory was not big enough to hold the entire stack at once. So you put it on screens and you keep track of what's on the screen. And I got into VR because a product came along. The one that I use is called Immersed, that said, hey, you can do this in VR. And so I tried it and I had more screens and they were bigger. And that meant I was able to keep track of this entire externalized working memory. So all of that context in bulk and still trace a nuanced thread through it. And once I started that, I never went back. So that was March of 2019. If I am not on camera, I'm in the headset. And I've gone through several versions of headsets, several iterations since then, leveled up the technology, the visuals, the arrangement that I have in that environment. Changed jobs and still kept all of that. And it's been phenomenal. I would never go back to working on pancake monitors if I had any choice.
Pancake monitors. That's a unique way to put it. Yeah, I'm over here like amazed at my, I think, 34-inch ultra wide curved monitor, but I can't imagine working on 25 feet. Oh, well, I think what is it? Almost 100 feet of real estate, right? For coding and just tasks. Um, but how did you even find out about the ability to work in VR? I knew it was a possibility, and I'd heard of people doing it, but prior to you, I'd never actually seen someone do it in a professional setting. So like, how did you actually explore about setting that system up?
Well, I had been looking for it for a while, and there were some things that would give you like a monitor that you could work with. And they were nice and big, but it wasn't until there was good multi-monitor support that I made the leap myself. So I had tried some fledgling technology for it, because I started doing VR back in 2014, and this tech didn't show up until 2019 in that form. And the reason that I found it was a friend of mine was getting into VR. He wanted to try something standalone instead of PC driven, and at the time, standalone VR meant you were either doing the Gear VR or the Oculus Go. It was small, it was underpowered, it overheated quickly, but it was accessible. And he was looking into it as a medium for his autistic son, who is not particularly verbal, and who has a fascination for screens and for certain environments. And he wanted to find something that was going to be a safe but immersive educational tool. And so he got him that, and he put him into these environments, supervised, of course, but watching him interact with sea creatures swimming around him as though they were real was a profound experience, and helped foster new forms of connection with his son. And he also asked me, all right, well, this is cool. What else can I do with it? Is there anything productive that I can do? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to Google up and see what has emerged on the market since I last checked. And that's when I found Immersed, and I recommended it to him, and he said, this totally works. So I tried it out for myself, and I have been a release day hardware upgrader ever since.
Wow. Release day. So what are you currently rocking? I know last we spoke, we were both on the Quest, I think, was it 2? Are you going to upgrade to the Pro whenever it comes out? Or are you sticking to or moving to a different company?
Well, I've got the Pro now. I had that, we'll say, I had that with a generous lead time, which was nice because of the work that I'm doing now. I will be upgrading to the 3 when it comes out, because of the increase in processor, and it's about a 10% bump in resolution over the Quest Pro, but that 10% will still be impressive, and comes with a new depth sensor, so some new capabilities for it. So yeah, I'm going to keep upgrading. For me, it is now a work expense. And that work expense is that versus upgrading other monitors or other features. But I've also used it now, not just in my office, but also on the go. So when traveling, that means I'm at a hotel room, I put on the headset, and I still have my entire multi-monitor setup. Or coffee shops, or wherever you want to go, you have all your screens. And when you have good color pass-through like you do on the Pro, you don't lose your situational awareness by sticking your head in the metaverse. You're still able to see and interact with your surroundings safely. So all you do in that case is you look like a doofus in public, but you have your screens, you have your productivity, you have your privacy because nobody can see what you're doing. And it gives you a certain amount of focus that comes with that as well. But I also, I broke my foot about a year after starting to use it, rather horribly. Smashed it with a cabinet, broke a couple of the large, the biggest bone in the foot, the first metatarsal, the toe, second metatarsal, just lots of stuff. And it was 0 weight bearing for 4 months, and it had to be elevated for like the first 3. And for the first several weeks of that, I was confined to the recliner. Right, not a bad place to be confined, but recliner didn't fit in my office. So I went out to the recliner in the family room and took my headset, took my laptop, and once again, all of my screens were there. So in terms of changes in ability or accessibility, the ergonomics for it are huge, because it can be used anywhere. Humans are not made to be especially static creatures. We don't do well if you sit in a fixed pose for a long time. Your muscles will cramp, your bones will start to creak and crack when we try and move again after that. And when you have these headsets, now they boast fairly high resolution. I mean, it's not until we get to the Apple Vision Pro that you're getting 4K plus per eye. But you also have to remember that resolution is being stretched across a much wider field of view. The typical monitor is going to be taking up most of your central high resolution vision. So you're going to be looking at something that takes up 10 degrees of your field of view. Whereas you're looking at something in a headset that takes up 90, 100 degrees of your field of view. So the effective resolution, the pixels per degree, is much lower than a traditional monitor. So you do have to look around and physically move around in order to see everything. So I want to just say that first. If you're not going to be fooled by putting on a headset and thinking that you're looking at your traditional monitors. It's not. It's blown up, but that blow up also means greater comfort. So I never squint. I never have to lean in to look at anything. I don't have eye fatigue, and rather than turn and strain too much, I'll just turn my whole chair, or I'll just move the monitor because I can put them anywhere I want. So there's a high ergonomic value to having a persistence of small movements throughout the day. So I'm not stiff anymore as a result. So that lack of stiffness, the focal length is about twice the distance of a traditional monitor of where somebody would put one. So your eyes are more relaxed. I manage the entire color scheme, and I even balance the bias lighting of the environment against whatever it is that I have displayed on my screen. So my entire visual sphere is calibrated to the work I'm doing, the level of energy, the level of concentration, fatigue, etc. And then you also borrow spatial memory from that. So keeping everything in your head. So I started this by talking about externalizing my working memory, which is really important as a coder when the code that you're tracing is in 3 modules and across a dozen files, to look at your line of execution. But the nice thing is human brains work really well with locations in space. So we remember where something is. And when that where something is not metaphorical, but it now actually lives in a certain arc radius of my visual environment, then my working memory only has to worry about the locations of things. And then when I attend them, that's when I go through all the processing steps. So that large real estate means I can now segment my attention and my focus by, I've got a central core of the things that I'm working on, supporting material, communications, Spotify, whatever it is that I need moves further and further out to the literal periphery. But I don't have to tab away from my screen. I don't have to replace my screen contents. I do use virtual desktops on top of virtual displays, which is phenomenal. But it means that my attention is something that I can cultivate in a more intentional way than I could with multiple things trying to pop up in the same real estate. Now they just each get their own, and I attend to them as needed. I also use spatial audio tricks for that. So my Discord is on a far right server. And so in my audio systems, I take my Discord sounds and I pan them all the way over to the right. So I actually hear sounds emanating from a preferred location as something that helps me to maintain that spatialization as well.
Rather than just hearing a random ping, and you have to search for it, you can literally hear what direction it's coming from. You can turn to that direction and start working on whatever, if it's important, right? That's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, Paul, nice to meet you, by the way.
Hey, Christian.
I do have a question. So when Marcel pitched this episode to me, I know he said that when one of the first times that he met you, you invited him to, I believe it was a Teams meeting, right, Marcel? And he said that you were sitting in, it was your virtual reality avatar. And he told me that you were sitting, on a desk within your virtual reality headset, and you were, I guess your background environment was space. Now, working in that environment and having your entire desktop on that space, do you feel like you have a productivity loss of not having an actual physical keyboard? Because for me, I feel that I have to have that physical keyboard, or is it all done virtually?
Oh, you've got to have a physical keyboard. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm rocking a Kinesis Advantage 360 Pro. So Bluetooth programmable ZMK firmware keyboard. Each half of it is mounted on half of the chair. So I've got one half on each. I've got a trackball positioned here. So I'm rocking it Spock style in terms of the physical touch typing keyboard shortcuts for everything. So yeah, you can't wave your hands around. You can't talk to your computer all day, especially at the time I was coding Perl. And if you're trying to like speak coding languages, especially Perl, you might as well be working in Klingon. I mean, it's the level of punctuation involved is not friendly to the human tongue. So yes, definitely physical keyboard, physical mouse, and it still applies because it's just a regular computer, but piped into VR. So mouse moves wherever I move it to. Now we might be getting improvements with eye gaze tracking and things that make the mouse side of management a little bit easier, but it's still traditional computer inputs. Because you had touched on the showing up as an avatar with space as my background. In that environment, I can use my avatar. I can use Ready Player Me avatars, or I can use the Meta, the Oculus avatars. And I can just say, give me a virtual webcam, and I can put it anywhere I want. So in that space, I typically overlay it on the video screen for the whatever conference I'm in or looking at, so that when I look at that, I'm actually looking into the camera, even more so than I can do on a traditional desktop. So yeah, that was definitely a thing. Only for casual meetings, though. I wouldn't do a one-on-one as just an avatar, unless somebody was joining me as their avatar as well. So I've done a number of meetings since then. Almost all of my meetings now do take place in virtual formats. Well, I wouldn't say that. It's probably about 70-30 of virtual versus video conference. And those virtual meetings are very often a round of golf or mini golf, which can be Walkabout Mini Golf is surprisingly immersive and effective for doing those kinds of semi-casual one-on-one or business-related meetings, because there's a cadence of turn taking. It's a low-pressure, great way to engage. Actually, a little over a year ago, I was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal about the use of Walkabout Mini Golf as a form of casual business interactions. Now, before we had this kind of a lag shift here, and I was talking about the avatars. Jonathan, you were asking about being tethered.
Are you still tethered to a PC, or is your headset, powerful enough to have a lot of this running on its own processor?
Yeah, so I'm still using a traditional PC, or in this case, I'm using a Mac. At Grant Street, I was using Linux, so this is a cross-platform tool. And it's important to do that because that's where the software that I need to use still lives. Now, when the Vision Pro comes out, that's going to have a native M1 chip that will be capable of running more of this software locally. But I think the question of where a software is running versus where you are using it is going to become more abstract as time goes on. So instead of worrying about, am I powerful enough to run it on the machine, or which piece of hardware is it actually being executed on, all I care about is what I can see and what I can provide input to. So I think we're going to be seeing an increase in the use of virtual machines piped in at some distance, and or slices of a virtual machine, something running a version of an app, and all I see is the interface of that app, because that's the only thing that I need. So I could be in my virtual world piping in from Windows, from Mac, from Linux, all simultaneously, depending on which one is running the thing that I need. So yeah, I'm tethered for now, and I think the distinction between tethered and on headset is going to become academic as time goes on.
Now, for the Vision Pro, do you have high expectations of it, being used mainstream. I know when Apple had their initial video release, a lot of people were pretty upset about the high cost for that headset. Do you have high expectations for it?
I think it's positioned differently in the market. It's not going to be a consumer device. I think it's very much a business-focused device, and it's also it's aimed at a different population. So the people that are going to be using it are going to be early adopters, fanboys, and they're hoping to get a corporate angle. And if you're selling a $3,500 piece of hardware to corporate, that's fine. They shell out $5,000 for Cintiq displays for animators to do pen on display kinds of work all the time. I mean, that's nothing
Right.
from a bottom line on a business budget. And they want to capture a business experience that is viable. And we don't have that yet in the VR, the XR space outside of specialized use cases, simulators, industrial, medical training. Those are the only places where there is a high enough value on the training relative to the physical discomfort and the logistical headache of putting together the environments to do that work. So right now, the risk-reward trade-off is, or not risk, the ROI for using VR in business contexts, it tends to focus almost exclusively around those use cases. And what Apple is hoping to do is move it outside of that with something that is capable, that is well self-contained, and that introduces a kind of interface artistry that can utilize depth. So we do not yet have a good visual or UI vocabulary for working in a spatial system. Even Apple doesn't. What they showed was a bunch of two-dimensional screens being used in a three-dimensional space, or good movies. They're not emphasizing the virtual reality side of things, where you start to interact more with virtual environments, because they're not looking at gaming. They don't want people sweating in their precious headsets. They want something that is business and casual. And I think what's really going to be important with the Vision Pro is, A, it does legitimize the experience of using some of these technologies in a business context, and B, getting it in the hands of more designers. And those designers are going to be looking at, okay, well, instead of looking at everything being a two-dimensional screen, these square screens that we've grown up with, where do I actually have to put information that makes it accessible to a person? Or how do I integrate what they are doing and what they need to know with the location that they are at? So you look at the qualities of cartographers. There is an entire branch of science dedicated to the spatialization of data. So information that is not inherently spatial, how do you then take it and represent it in a spatial way so that it is effectively navigable, so that somebody can perceive it, can move within it, can manipulate it effectively? And they still have been constrained by two dimensions for most of their work. But once you take that into that third dimension, you increase depth, and most importantly, you're able to provide it as a reference to the individual. So an egocentric reality that says it's surrounding me, not. So you've got egocentric, which is it is about the person. You've got allocentric, which is it is about the world. So an egocentric thing would follow an individual, and an allocentric thing would be pinned to a location in the environment. And so blending between those to say what information belongs to a person, what information is projected into the world, how do we design these things so that by interacting with objects in certain ways, we have an interface vocabulary that says, I'm attending to this, I'm manipulating it, I'm providing these cues of information, and I'm doing it in a way that is beautiful, delightful, and not inherently fatiguing. Right, so that visual design vocabulary for a true 3D UX, for the actual spatial computing and not just displays in VR, that's something that we need a qualified design cohort to work on. And the best way to do that is going to be through introducing something like Apple's headset. Also, you never buy V1 for Apple. It just, you wait for them to work out the kinks on subsequent versions.
course.
So it's going to the right hands of people who have a tolerance for the early quirks or who are going to be underutilizing the hardware. Once they polish out those things and they come out with the SE models or the 2.0s, that's going to be, I think, a more well-informed design.
That makes
Sorry,
sense.
lots of tangents there, lots to unpack.
No, this is wonderful. And talking about Apple's Vision Pro, if anyone's able to make something mainstream, it's Apple, right? When smartwatches first came out, they were kind of like, oh, well, this isn't really useful for most people. But now you see half of the world is rocking an Apple Watch or a Samsung Watch because even though they're not utilizing to its full potential, it's cool. It looks fancy and it is somewhat productive to have that information on your wrist rather than always having your phone on you or, having to pull out your phone. People said that about the iPhone too, right? Like, oh, who's going to need all this computing power in your pocket? We have computers at home and now, you have your iPhone that can calculate anything you need to or do anything you need to on the go. So, I'm excited to see how they make progress in making a little bit user friendly and maybe a little bit more pop culture than what has traditionally been the case, right? The first thing I'm always thinking about is like HoloLens. That was Microsoft's big push. And that kind of just flopped because it was too expensive and it was hard to use, right? Even the military is having a hard time finding the right applications for it. And so hopefully, this design cohort that has this first wave of Vision Pro can figure out, well, these features are more for industry, while these features might be more for the consumer.
And the things that you touched on there too are also really important. They are moving computing and communications infrastructure into the personal realm. It used to be if you wanted to talk on the phone, by the time phones actually showed up, you used to have to go to the telegraph office in order to send it. But then you had a phone in your home, but you were still tethered to the wall. You were fixed in place in order to use that. Same with computers. Once those showed up in the home, you were at a place in order to compute. And now we have combined that communications infrastructure and that compute power, and we've assigned it to the person who now takes it with them wherever they go. So their ability to leverage that technology to find information, to communicate with other people, or to express themselves onto the world, right? It moves in both directions. So it's not just consuming information. They can initiate change in their environment through these tools as well. They're now portable. That belongs to the individual. And the phone was, the iPhone, smartphones were a great step in that direction because now that computing, it's not as powerful as what I get when I sit down, but it's more convenient. And so the pieces that I would have a desire to use stay with me wherever I go. And now everybody's got cameras, everybody's got microphones. The quality of the rich social interactions, the sociological impact of distributing and democratizing access to that kind of infrastructure is enormous. And then you move that into, say, the Apple Watch. Well, that adds another layer of attention. The Apple Watches or smartwatches, they are a casual, momentary use technology. So if you need it at a glance, you have it literally at a glance. This tells you whether or not you need to attend more specifically to your phone. And your phone will tell you whether or not you need to sit down and write an email, or if you can just do a quick text. So all of those, that's level of power and level of attention and portability and accessibility for it. Now, when you can begin overlaying these things onto your environment in a way that is ambient, then your ability to control that attention more intentionally, decide how much of your brain power goes to what artifacts, is going to become kind of this seamless exchange with your environment instead of being so constrained to these different contexts. And I think one of the things I said that we needed to look at in the Mural use case when I first started was movies that include post-technological environments. So the art directors in far future sci-fi or some of these really far-flung things, movie versions of computers are always terrible because they speak plain English and they've got all the lights and the blips and the beeps going on, so they look interesting. But if you look at the post-technological side of things, where that becomes part of the fabric of society, you actually have some really interesting design ideals to steal from. So like the first Thor movie, when we get to Asgard, Thor explains that science and magic are one and the same for his people. And you get there and they have casual awareness of a context, casual awareness of intent, an ability to naturally express ideas that are then embedded on a responsive environment. So your ability to consume information and to express intent become these invisible paradigms. So a good example of Odin, when he's giving his speech about to in the coronation of Thor, and somebody breaks into the weapons vault, and he just knows. And when he knows that, in the context of knowing it, bangs his staff, activates the defense mechanisms, and they all go off and do their thing. How did that information intrude on his awareness? And how was it sufficiently aware of this bang of the staff versus that bang of the staff, meaning fire off this kind of action? And it's not something that you would design as an interface per se, but as an ideal of casually impressing on someone's awareness at the right level of attention, and inferring from context, from who somebody is, where they are, what they're doing, what they know, the resources they have available to them. That personal side of spatial computing embedded in your environment, that's where magic will happen. So that's what I'm looking forward to with these advances of technology. So going beyond the watch, the smartwatch, once it's on your eyeballs, once it is something that you can just naturally see, then any object becomes real or physical or digital, becomes capable of conveying action and interface and information. Sorry, I don't have a call to action to go with that. I'm just making all these tangential observations.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about what a post-technological, what these features would look like.
Looking at currently what's on television and whatever movies that are out right now, I think the main one that isn't flashy technology is Black Mirror. They do a really great job of integrating like what technology could be. For example, I know there's a few episodes of shouldn't be right.
Big time shouldn't be.
I know there's a few episodes where they talk. Yeah, there's a few episodes where it's all focused on virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
They do a great job of minimizing what that giant headset, and then it's just a device that just connects to the back of your head. So I think they do a really great job on conveying some of, or eliminating some of that flashy technology.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because it's not about the device, it's about the behavior. The device is just it's a force multiplier for human capacity. So it takes whatever it is that we can do and want to do, and either it attenuates that in some way. It turns it up or turns it down. So something that any tool gives us capabilities that we would not otherwise have, or amplifies things that we couldn't do without them. So I have increased strength and speed through the use of tools. I have increased informational capacity through the use of tools. And VR is just one more set of tools for that. And we've had all of the pieces for this in terms of our technological evolution for a long time. So I'm looking at you guys on screens, but I'm not actually looking at you. I'm looking at the color filtered illumination of LEDs inside of this thin panel that's being recreated by these algorithms from data that we've transmitted to one another. And we agree that these facsimiles are sufficiently representative of another entity that we are able to converse with one another. And even that conversation is still just electromagnetic measurements of the movement of a diaphragm being converted into a series of numbers transmitted the same way. So we haven't talked to people on the phone ever. We've only ever talked through the medium of the device and agreed that it sounds enough like the other person, and it is the right time, that it's probably the words that they're uttering, and that's good enough for us. That scale of good enough allows us to converse through these filtered mediums, these very imperfect medium, but still have a sense of identity that is attached to that. And that's coming up now through, sending a text is easy. You still feel like you're talking to someone, even though it's just that small small note, and you've got all the way up to now we have these video interactions. We're getting into virtual avatar interactions. All that is taking the visual that we are creating for ourselves, giving it some more depth, and taking it with us. And taking the idea of taking visual information with us isn't that different from taking audio information with us. You think about how revolutionary the Sony Walkman was when you were no longer tethered to your hi-fi system in order to listen to your music. It became portable, and cassettes were not as good as 8-tracks, and were definitely not as good as reel-to-reel because the resolution of the sound wasn't there. The speakers were these tiny little foam pads you stuck on your ears, but it offered you the portability. Good enough gets lower when the convenience increases. So we're seeing all of these trade-offs as we move in these different directions. So yeah, the technology is not as flashy. It is being minimized, but it really isn't about the technology. It's about what's good enough for the value for what a person wants to do. What is the behavior that it enables? And giving people the ability to take their personal soundtrack with them out into the wide world, which is what the Walkman did, was revolutionary. I think doing that with visual, once that becomes convenient, it has the possibility to mark a profound shift in the capabilities of humanity. I mean, nothing less than that, because it gives you the ability to mediate reality and to perceive and act in that world with greater intent and greater power, because that device knows who I am, knows where I am, knows what I'm trying to do, and my ability to express myself on that environment is going to be limited to what are my permissions and what are its capabilities. Just this morning, I saw somebody's demo on LinkedIn where they're using a Quest Pro and the Philips Hue lights. So they have all of the smart light bulbs and all these fixtures around their apartment. And where they said, all right, we're going to sync these things up. Wherever I am, turn on just those lights as I'm walking around. Or do it where I'm looking. Or do it where I point. Or pretend I'm holding a torch. And so illuminate in a sphere around that torch as it approaches whatever. It made the entire illumination of the environment responsive to the individual, to their presence and to their actions, and inherently to their identity. But what happens then when we put these ultrasonic transducer pads on the bottom of furniture so that we can gesture to something and rearrange the room? Because it now has the ability to scoot around autonomously, and all we're doing is providing information to it, right? We're going to be freaking Jedi. We're going to be perceiving something, making a gesture, and it will respond to us in a way that physically imprints on the world.
Oh, man, see, like now my head's going all over the place on all these different topics I want to touch on. But, the one thing that always comes to mind when we're talking about, making it personal, if you listen to a lot of startup schools, the big thing they always push is like making personalization, I can say that word, scalable, right? Which is hard, right? When people want personalized backpacks or a personalized piece of or device or whatever, it's hard to do because, of course, you need to make it to the standard of each and every person, right? But it seems like it might be very doable with AR and VR, especially VR, right? Where you're right. If I want to have this device and I want it to do certain things specifically for me in my environment or have a specific environment for myself, I can just code it to do that, right? Where, yeah, you know what? I don't want to move my furniture anymore. So I'm going to build it to where whenever I look at this thing and I make a gesture, it's going to move itself and make this thing happen, right? Or, you know what? I love the idea of feeling like a superstar with the lights shining as I walk through the hallway. Like I'm going to set that up for myself because I can, right? So it's interesting to see the possibilities that can come just from this technology. And, the next thing I'm really interested about, and I have kind of mixed feelings, is, what will this do to the social environment, right? How people interact with each other. Will this like improve social interaction, especially right now coming out of COVID, this is a big consideration, or will it, actually make it devolve even more? The constant like gripe is like, oh, these kids nowadays are always on their cell phone, or people just walking around staring at their cell phone. Would that be the same thing? People walking around with VR, AR headsets that are just not paying attention to the world around them? Or will it make them more personable because now they can interact with their remote workers or their coworkers or friends more deeply in these, metaversal environments? or how is that? What do you see that going?
They said the same thing about newspapers. You can find political cartoons lampooning newspapers because it was this cheap, disposable way of not paying attention to the world around you. And it was going to kill social discourse that happened during the commute or in other environments because the attention was now being constrained instead of being an open participant. But you touched on a number of things there. There's a technology that you can use on websites. So you've got your cascading style sheets, your CSS. You can actually specify variants. And now some of these are used dynamically, between desktop and mobile versions of things. But you can go into a dropdown and say, well, show me this variant instead. Almost nobody uses it because nobody knew it was there. But it means you can reskin a website immediately. So you and I could be looking at very different versions of the same content rendered according to our preferences. Now, eventually, we're going to be doing that with our environment. Like, I'm in a medieval mood today. Great. My home is my castle, literally. Or I really want to be on the Starship Enterprise, right? I give me the bridge of NCC 1701D, right? And spawn that up. But you could be looking at something else, right? You could be out there in Equestria looking at the My Little Pony version of things, while I am looking at the medieval version of things. And each person is represented or perceives their environment according to their preferences, which is good and bad, because that means you now have more likely that it's going to be this echo chamber of it's only self-reinforcing instead of being disruptive. And we need a certain amount of creative disruption in order to engage and to broaden ourselves. But it's also going to increase what is artistically available to us and the richness with which we inhabit those environments. The thing that you did not mention with all of this also was AI, right? So when we're starting to use generative AI for our environments, they become super dynamically adaptive to us. And when I can feed that my mood, well, then either the lights around me or the lights that I see, because you don't have to have physical lights when you're using XR or VR glasses. You can just, all right, say there's a light here. Great, there is. Right, all of these things can now respond to me. I could be in a bad mood and just marching down to Imperial March, right, Darth Vader's theme as I'm stalking the sidewalk. Or I could be happy, bouncy, and have something, flowers and happy sunshine, right? So all of these things could be reflective, or they could also be intentionally disruptive. What is my intended mood, and how do I get there from where I am, and have the software adapt to my intent and help me to get there? So you can use that to bring people into the same space from different starting points, so that you have the same level of energy and focus as you're collaborating on things. We can talk more about that later. But the other part of the social elements that you mentioned, new technology just enables us to do more of what we want to already. So the social fabric, the intent is already there. Holding conversations with teenagers has never been easy, and it's not just because they now have the ability to text their friends instead. Right, there's just always that generational gap, but I think it can be isolating, as you mentioned. It can also be connecting. There was a huge push during COVID, major bump in the quality and accessibility of VR, as you had people, especially fragile populations, in the 65 plus crowd, needing to feel like they were connected with other people and could not do so safely. And you ended up with this enormous community of people meeting up in real VR fishing, which is one of these titles that gives you a photogrammetry. So it is a scanned environment with a little bit of light animation. So it is representative of a real place. And you've got a virtual fishing rod, and you're out there just throwing a line, but you're doing it with somebody else. Oh, and here you can pop up a floating YouTube window and watch something while you're at it. So you've got your floating screen out there while you're pretending to fish, but doing it with other people and having a level of social engagement that it was not safe to have otherwise. I think for combating social isolation, it is a major tool. It's being used for fragile populations, for the underprivileged, for across socioeconomic boundaries. I know somebody who is running at the an Africa VR campus program to get headsets to people who don't even have schools, and using that to recreate environments and educational opportunities that would not exist otherwise. I know people who are working with it specifically to combat elderly isolation, others that are using it for unlocking people with ALS. So people who have very limited ability to express themselves can now use brain-computer interface. So just a little bit of EEG to find out what you're paying attention to now can say, what is it in the environment or in this interface you're paying attention to, and use that to build information that you can then convey to other people. So you can type with your brain in those cases using this technology. So the addressing social isolation or neurodivergences or socioeconomic, the potential there, I think, far outweighs the fact that we're going to have people snubbing one another to hang out with their particular brand of cohort or furries, or whatever the group is that wants to be self-reinforcing. These groups have always been self-reinforcing. People have always had clubs and areas where they attend to just those things of their interest. I think that will continue. I think the possibility for good far outweighs the negatives that would come from that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like culturally here in the US, I think we're not there yet where everyone has a VR headset in their home.
Oh, we're so far from that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I mean, not my generation, and I would even say my cousin's generation of kids. I'd probably say my grandkids are going to be the ones that actually take this adoption and it be integrated in their life. I know they've been pushing to have, VR and AR really, have cultural significance, but I don't think it's there yet. And I think it's going to be a long while until it's a possibility.
I think VR, right? So being fully immersed is going to be a hard sell for people, especially in public, right? There's a lot of paranoia around having awareness in your environment, right? But I think augmented reality is like that Trojan horse to get people to kind of buy into the idea. We're already on our cell phones day to day. We want this information. We already have some of it. A lot of our cars have these displays that give us this information, heads up, these heads up displays, these HUDs. And imagine being able to walk around with that now. So when you're walking down, a boulevard and trying to find a restaurant, instead of you looking at your phone, following instructions, it's literally on your Google Glasses or your Apple, whatever the smaller version is, right? Or I know there's a company right now, and they're actually ex-Apple. I can't remember the name of it, but basically they're looking to develop these holographic devices that give you this information on your palm, whether it's displayed on your lenses. Yeah. That way you can kind of have this GPS up and running. You can see the temperature. You can watch a YouTube video as you're walking. And I think that's going to be quickly adopted as soon as it's actually practical and useful, right? Of course, there's going to be the V1, and we never buy the V1, as Tom said, right? Never buy it. But once V2 and V3 come out, I think in a decade or so, we'll see people being more immersed in these, AR and VR technologies. And once they adopt AR, at home, VR is a quick sell. If I want to watch Oppenheimer and I want to be fully immersed in that explosion, of course I'll do it in VR. IMAX is great, but if I can do it in VR, that's even better. I can literally be at the explosion and see it happen, right? There's a selling point there of entertainment that I think will have people kind of quickly fall in love with the idea of having this personalized environment around them that's not just limited to that 2D screen.
But the thing is that they have done that. They did that with the Google Glass, and that failed 100%, I would say. I've seen that device where you put it on your palm, but I do think that you're gonna have to convince people to actually adopt it. Like I don't like, it's all great and all, but I still think that people crave going to the movies and having that experience. And same thing for like another example is going to concerts, right? Like we talked about in a previous episode, just selling a seat and then just having a VR headset and you tune in to that concert. I say this because when I go out and I ask people who don't have the experience of using a VR headset or having these experiences, And when I do ask them, would you ever buy a ticket to a concert and just tune in? They always say no, because they want to have the actual experience and going and doing the thing that they're doing and not doing it virtually. And that's why I say I think it's going to be a while until that's actually reality where everybody is doing it.
And here's the fun thing. I think you're both right. Because Jonathan, what you talked about was actually a casual encroachment of these AR technologies into the environment. But I don't think that 10-year mark is going that's not going to represent a major shift. It will be commonplace, but it will not be household. It's not going to be on everybody's face. And Christian, you're absolutely right. You look at the introduction of the personal computer, getting that into offices as a business technology. It was limited to the accountants until you had a secondary cohort that aged into that world, was familiar with the technology, and then brought it with them. Only then did you get rid of secretaries whose only job was to manage dictation, because everybody had not only word processors but had computers where you could fix your mistakes because nobody knew how to type, because they didn't grow up typing. All of these things had to happen with a generational shift depending on where people's familiarity was with it. The technology is rapidly evolving. You can get embedded waveguide optics now that make virtual displays possible within a glasses form factor. A little chunky, but totally doable. But yeah, the social fabric isn't there until we've demonstrated the utility. So yeah, I think we definitely need the generational shift of people who grow up with technology, with the design vocabulary to use these things effectively, and who expect that technology to meet those capabilities, because that's what they have been introduced to, and that's the expectation that they bring with them. The other rebuttal that I would have too on the idea of concerts is we are increasingly augmenting concerts with technology. So you look at that giant sphere that they just built in Vegas. $2 billion they put into this entertainment venue. The interior uses the entire interior display surface effectively also as a display. And they use that as an augmentation or an addition to whatever it is you are there to watch, whether it's a movie or a concert or some other venue. And they have to do it by building a $2 billion sphere. Whereas if you are just wearing your glasses and you say, I'm tuning into this channel, you could use that to augment where you are and have that same effect. It's like that meme about, look what they have to do to just emulate a fraction of our power, right? If you can modify your entire environment, then you don't, based off of what you perceive, then you don't have to modify your entire environment in actuality. That's where that virtual distance comes from. And once that level of perception is indistinguishable from the qualities of being somewhere physically, then what's the difference at that point? Mm-hmm. If the concert looks and sounds as good, and I feel that the way that I express myself is being added to this environment, so not just as a passive consumer, but if I cheer, who's going to hear it, right? Once those, what we're essentially doing is eliminating the boundaries of space. So the visual technologies, the audio technologies that now are portable to the individual, they make us masters of distance. We've already abstracted away sound, we've abstracted away light. Now we're abstracting away space. It doesn't matter where you are. It only matters who you are and what you have access to, in order to experience the remote as though it was present with you or you were present with it.
This is, yeah. Whoa. Oof. Now I'm trying to imagine all these things. And, I funny enough, talking about concerts, I actually attended a VR concert once, and it was shortly after Fortnite had thrown their little Fortnite, events in the thing. And an artist had put together
the marshmallow event.
An artist I listened to, and I think I just found him on YouTube, was throwing a VR concert, and you just tune into a specific, I forget it was like an app, and the music would be playing, and around you it would have these displays and these things going on, and it was pretty epic in my opinion. And you're right, I can imagine going to that sphere, and we were just in Vegas last week, funny enough, and we saw the sphere, and it looks magnificent. And I can imagine being in that sphere and seeing those screens and it being immersive. But I don't think it's going to be at the level that, you know, a VR headset, or even if you added a little bit of AR in there, that could, how immersive that could be, right? Because now you still in that sphere are going to see a 2D display of whatever image or graphics they have. But now you put on the headset and you might see the giant robot walking over you, right? And you feel that size rather than just seeing it on the screen. Or you might see the laser show, or you can see the, you know, the black hole that they're displaying almost in first person. So I'm still curious to see how that they kind of include that technology and how they, you know, adapt it to like level up that level of immersion and make it even more fun and more crazy to experience these things, whether at home or at the venue, right?
I'll get back to you on that, because my dad is actually going to one of the U2 concerts there. I think he's going like
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's one of the first concerts that are happening there. So I will make sure to ask him how that went, because I mean my dad's gone to like over 500 concerts and he's super excited for, you know, they're going to a concert in the Sphere.
So there is, I'm looking for the reference on this. There was a pianist who knew he was going to die, Kagami. Reiichi Sakamoto. He knew he was dying, and he was going to be giving some of his final concerts. And he was like, okay, how can we do this? How can we preserve the performance in a legitimate way that really enables people to have the emotional response to it, that is not just knowing that it was my last concert, but how can they be with me for this? And so they did a volumetric scan of his performance. So he wore, you know, basic markers, and he performed his music knowing it was going to be one of the last times. And they did that full volumetric capture, and now there is a venue. It's like $70 a ticket in and they run every 90 minutes. You go in New York and you can see his performance. You go to your seat and they give you a pair of Magic Leap glasses. You put those on from your seat, and it's a small audience. And from wherever you're sitting, you get to see Sakamoto perform on the piano. And they have lighting effects and the same kinds of things that you would do with projector mapping, but gets extended into the larger world. So those lighting effects, and they do have physical lighting effects, and then they also have the VR components that extend that into that environment with this virtual ghost who's sitting there playing. And it's not just simple audio either. Again, they actually captured his performance, and they're replaying that on the piano the same way that you would with other disclavier technologies. So that, you know, it's they caught all of the nuances, and the piano is being actuated to re-perform in that same way. But now you get to see the guy doing it, how he did it, why he did it, the choices that he was making in the process, and all of this reinforces that. And it is a virtual concert in some ways and a physical concert in others, and they are constantly sold out because of the quality of the experience. The only unfortunate thing that he noted in doing this is, as for immersive as it is, it's still unchanging. It is still a recording. It's not a responsive synthesis in a way that a performer would typically relate to the energy that they feel from the audience. That's one of the places that we might insert an AI shim and say, okay, we need a little bit more of this energy, a little bit less of this. We're going to change the tempo in these ways based off of the emotive responses that we're measuring from the audience, and create this dynamic reinterpretation layer that allows him to be exaggerated in some areas, subdued in others, or to change the timing on things, so that it's still a person who performed the capture, but now it's mediated by this dynamic, intentionally disruptive element in order to inspire change at the right time to be compatible with the expectations of the needs of the audience. So there are ways that we can blend these technologies in a very complementary fashion and introduce new capabilities at the same time and make it worthwhile.
That'd be interesting. You know, these artists can then now record themselves, and if they get permission, and I think we're seeing this with acting, right? And this is what the actors are kind of fighting against. You know, if they sign their likeness away, they can have an AI hologram or virtual display then perform for them. That'd be super futuristic. Now we get to watch, I think it's a little late for Michael Jackson, but let's say in this generation, Drake, right? Drake, after he passes away, for future generations can still perform and even come up with possibly new songs, right? And keep performing. That'd be a little dystopian, but pretty cool at the same time.
Have that improvisational element. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you kind of already see that with like the Tupac hologram that they brought out at Coachella one year, and same thing with like the Notorious B.I.G. hologram. It just never really caught on, but I do think with something like that, and it's a little bit more real. I think you'll have those dead artists performing eventually.
That sounds like the name of a venue, Dead Artists Performing.
Dead Artists Performing.
We've also been doing this since, I think Jurassic Park was the first time that there was a CGI face swap for a stunt performer. So you had a stunt performer, and then they put the actress, her face on that performer, just a digital redo, and it looks like the performer or the actress herself did it. So we have a digitally mediated physical performance in that case, and you might find these tribute artists and lookalikes who are able to use just a little bit of augmentation to go all the way into capturing the embodiment that they're aiming for. The impressionists are going to be leveled up using this technology. So again, I think there's a blend in doing that. And also, Hollywood has been making digital actors for years just for those cut scenes and stunt actions and whatnot. The question is, how much is too much, and where is it the performance of the CGI artist versus the actor that they're emulating? How do you copyright a style of doing a thing? Most importantly, I want actors and creators to be properly compensated for their work, for the creative genius that they put into a thing, and for the qualities of their likeness. So if anybody is going to be making a profit off of any of these kinds of technologies, then I think part of that has to go to the source material as an artist, as their estate, and in order to be fair. But I also really love the idea of novel synthesis from noobs, right? I want people being creative who would not otherwise be. You could also label this as kind of a talentless creation. And there's going to be so much junk that comes out of that. It's going to be just the worst. It's like when everybody found MySpace or everybody got a blog, and you had all of these novice voices making just utter trash and a few gems.
Making podcasts on YouTube.
I think we will. Just don't even get me started on those. Yeah. And it's the same thing. When you give everybody a voice, not everybody's voice is going to be worth listening to. I mean, obviously this one is. You guys are great. But you're going to find some gems. We have seen careers launched from YouTubers, musical careers, acting careers. You get these creative forms of creative expression that you would not have otherwise had. And that's going to include these AI-assisted musical creations, all of the mid-journey poster artwork that you see everywhere, right? Your ability to create story, to express ideas, and to have them represented in a higher quality fashion in these novel medium is going to, again, it's going to be a democratizing aspect. People are going to be able to create when they couldn't have before. And some of that is going to be amazing. And I'm in it for the sum of that. And for the fact that it's going to be a learning process. It is an augmentation to what they otherwise could have been doing.
No, I agree. I think one of the great things about tools like Midjourney and some of these AI that can help you create music, it helps people, and people like me who have the vision in their head of what they want to create, but don't have the ability to actually go out and draw or go out and produce a song. I know when we were trying to develop a song for this podcast, we knew kind of like the tone that we wanted to go for. We just didn't know how to do it. And I know Marcel tried so hard to use like AI, and we were there and he was helping us out and kind of got us on the right path to do it. And just, it unlocks that creativity of people, like you said.
Well, and that's always been the case too. Ever since you've had arpeggiators and drum machines and hurdy-gurdies, right? Anything that you could turn a crank on to make music, that suddenly meant the artist didn't have to know or perform all of those techniques in order to get all of the sounds that they were looking for. So we have always used technology to fill the gaps in capability and to enlarge our creative expression.
Yeah, I don't know why this brought up a random memory, but talking about people using tools to like make their music, I was watching a video of the Gorillas, and there's what's that song that goes, "I have sunshine in a bag," and so funny enough.
Oh, Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood, yeah, there we go. And they're talking about like all these new tools that are coming out and all these beats and the AI tools. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, we made this song with a thing we found at a garage sale, and you press the button and it had the beat, and then we just recorded over it, right?" And it's like, I can only imagine now, you're gonna have these artists gonna be like, "Make me a sci-fi beat," and then just gonna record over it. And some of it's gonna be garbage, but some of it can be these classic songs like Clint Eastwood, like the Gorillaz have made, that are just going to be fantastic, and it's going to enable all these new artists to make this music that we've probably either never heard of or they were never able to express before, right? So I'm excited to see what comes out of this and who becomes big off of this new wave.
Yeah, me too. I have no idea where it's going to go from here. And then also, Christian, speaking to your point about the newer generations aging into this population, they will bring with them new creative ideas that expand even on these. They will have the expectation of that personalized content, giving them this unique musical flair or artistic flair, both in what they create and how they perceive the work of people around them. If they want, give me this music, but with a slightly jazzier beat, that's just going to stream off of whatever service through an AI reinterpretation to give them the remix that they're looking for. So the dynamic personalization expectation and the new capabilities and patterns of thought, of creative inspiration that it's going to unlock are going to be just really cool to see. And I feel fortunate being a nerd who's able to stay on the cusp of this technology as it evolves, because then I get to see and appreciate those not just as a new fabric of life, but also where it came from. I get to see that transitional period as my kids or my grandkids come into it, and I'm going to be right there with them. This is a great time to be at the forefront, even though we're a ways out there. We're running faster than I think a lot of society is, and a lot of the social implications. There's a lot of catch up to do, a lot of things to figure out. But yeah, what a great time to be a nerd.
And that's what we're doing this podcast.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed most about doing this podcast is actually going out and trying to research some of these companies that are on the cusp of doing something that's new. One of my favorite ones that I've been looking into is a proto hologram.
Mm-hmm.
I've showed Marcel, their company website, and we've talked about it. I think they have something great going on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know how long you've got or where you want to go with it, or if there's other topics. We've introduced several things that we haven't gotten back to yet, but I wanted to see first if you have any specific questions or directions you want to go.
No, I was going to ask a little bit about Mural and what other technologies you're kind of excited to see. But if you have something you want to bring up, feel free to touch back and tie some of these points off.
Well, we can rabbit hole on any of these. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we're doing at Mural. So I have the greatest job title in the world. My official title there is creative scientist. So I am applying scientific principles to new creative endeavors so that we can find out what works, what doesn't work, why and how, distill those into principles and practices, and then apply them to product design. And we're doing this in VR by creating a collaborative environment. So one of the biggest challenges that is faced in any kind of collaboration is making it an intentional facilitation. So anybody can have creative tools. You can put a bunch of people in a room with a whiteboard, or you can give people a remote whiteboard that they can all access simultaneously. It's still a whiteboard. What do you do with it? And Mural has a really good collaborative visual communications tool available. But if you are not a collaborative visual communicator, that doesn't mean much to you. Other than where did I write down this thing and having to go pull up yet another document from yet another SaaS provider. A while ago, they bought, actually just over a year ago now, I think they bought the Luma Institute, which is a facilitation training group. They teach people how to conduct effective workshops for reflection, for ideation, for brainstorming, for refinement, for team building. And there is an entire industry of facilitators out there who will come in and teach your group how to perform one of these workshops, or will help you design different workshop kinds. Like getting a group of people together to design OKRs for a company is big business, because getting people together so that they can communicate effectively and not just be the worst Zoom meeting of all time is a challenge, especially when people are remote, right? So all of this sets the stage for if you're going to have a good communications tool, you still have to have good communications tools. And getting a facilitator into every workshop does not scale particularly well. So how do we then abstract the active facilitation in a way that would scale with a team, especially with remote teams? And so in VR, what we have done is, well, first we set up a number of experiments that said, what are the facilitation practices that are used for these kinds of activities? Which ones of them would benefit from a sense of embodiment, of being there, of using yourself and your position in space relative to activities and other individuals? And what is it that makes those tick? So we built a bunch of these activities in miniature, and we put a large number of people through those to see how they connected with the activity, how they connected with each other, what were the outcomes, what was effective, what did they like, what did they not like, and scored all of that research that we did to see what is most effective if you're using VR in a productive or facilitative context. What do people think about this? And we found a number of really interesting factors that we are now applying into the design of our bespoke application. The first and most important one is VR as a technology is best when it connects people to each other. So it didn't matter how good or how entertaining we made the activity. If their focus was on the activity and not on another person, it just didn't, it was mixed. So we had some positives, some negatives for those. But if their focus was on, if the activity supported and enabled conversation with one another, that's when you had the deepest engagement and the highest and most positive scoring from the experience. So we did a number of these things where we had a rose, thorn, bud exercises, which is a common form of retrospective. We had sailboat exercises, which is a way of visualizing and labeling different aspects of a journey as a metaphor for your activities. And we had campfires, we had a bunch of things that you do in simulation with these standard facilitation practices. And the one that stood out, that won the highest praise overall, had zero detractors in all of the scoring that we did, was we called it the genie game, but it's really just a question kind of icebreaker. So the way that we created it was you had this genie lording over a fire, and you had a kind of a vendor's stall, and you got to choose what kind of object you wanted to chuck into. And you would grab something that was a nice, round, soft-looking object. You had something that was square, and you had something that was like pointy and red metallic. So you had your easy, your medium, and your hard for the level of intensity or intimacy required for having a conversation. And you would take it, you'd chuck it into the fire, and the fire would change color, and there'd be a dramatic poof, and you would see, the individual who threw it would then see a prompt, a question for that individual And it was their choice if they were going to read it aloud, if they were going to answer it, if it was going to spur discussion. But it gave them a moment to reflect and then to tell stories to each other, prompted by these icebreaker questions. And this is typically done with just a simple card deck. But the theatricality, the act of selecting an object, of performing a physical motion that would cause it to be thrown, the responsiveness of that environment, all of these things were intended to create a sense of embodiment, because you had to use your body, and you had to use your body in reference to that space, which caused you to be invested in that space as your location. It told you, it's all the subconscious cues that say, I am here. So intentional embodiment and intentional activity and responsiveness of that environment. But it created a combination of curiosity and vulnerability, and gave a safe framework and process for exploring that. And when you have curiosity and vulnerability in any kind of exchange between people, you generate intimacy. So what we had done was created this empathy machine that gave people a self-directed amount of participation. Are you going to grab an object? Are you going to what kind? Are you going to throw it into the fire? Are you going to just listen? Are you going to add on to somebody's story? Right? All of this was so open-ended, the way that it typically is with a deck of cards, but making it a more active and spectacular venue just reinforced the novelty of the experience. And that takes me to the other part of this, and that is play. Play disarms fear. And anything that you can play for work. You can do games for work, in the sense that you need to have an environment of self-contained rules, right? We get to play pretend for a while that this environment is the world, and this world will have a beginning where we all start, and it has rules that govern just this world. So we have this segmented virtual environment, and then at the end we bring it to a close. We have a conclusion to it, which is the same with any game format. So a game is just a way of simulating a particular context. And it's always been a virtual environment, but it's a virtual one in our head. Otherwise, kicking a ball down a field doesn't mean anything unless it's got a goalpost, and unless you're only able to use your feet and all the rules that govern that game. Those are not physical constraints. They're virtual constraints that we agree to as a populace. And then you have the participants, and you have the observers, you have all of these different roles. So the idea of play is an important aspect for suspending the traditional rules and applying case-specific rules. So by creating a playful environment that was spectacular, that was memorable, that used people's spatial memory and a sense of embodiment to engender this curiosity and vulnerability, right? We had to tear people away from that activity. And these would be either a team who knew each other was, forget it. That's the only thing that they were even going to do for the rest of the session. But a team, just because they found it engrossing. But a team of complete strangers would come out the other side feeling engaged with one another and with a new level of personal understanding. And then we would continue the tour through the other venues that we had designed to see how those work. Those are the kinds of principles that we've been exploring, and those are the learnings that we're extracting from them to apply to the design for us of a venue that encourages interpersonal connection, that has an ordered facilitation process, not just enabled by, but embedded into an intelligent environment. And we're even now exploring the use of AI-generated NPCs who can provide you with this infinitely patient facilitation expertise, right? You can have a natural language conversation with, well, how do I do this? What do we do next? And it can know who everybody is and what they've contributed already in order to guide them to the next step in the process. So these large language learning models, they don't give you a lot in terms of genuine creativity or synthesis, but if you give them a case-specific problem, they're really good at incorporating additional contextual information and making that conversational and being able to parse and synthesize in natural language processing. So we found a way to scale the facilitation aspect of using visual and now spatial communication tools. And we are creating virtual environments to take advantage of that in ways that we hope will resonate with people in enterprises where, especially a distributed enterprise, where people are not able to physically be together. To give them a sense of being and a sense of purpose and creative, effective artifacts on the other side, so that when you have done your exercises and your priority matrix evaluations, well, the results of that just populate back into whatever your document repository is as a standard business outcome. So we're using it to add play to the aspects of collaboration in a way that we hope will scale and be engaging with people who are using it. And that's my job, right? I got to do that for a living right now.
I'm very jealous. Very, very jealous.
I don't always wear the lab coat, but I can.
And so, I think the second question I had was, technologies you're excited to see developing. And I think we've talked about it quite often throughout the discussion is AI, right? The mix between, the metaverse and the function that AI will serve in that metaverse. Is there any specific type of, AI models that you're looking at as like, this will be groundbreaking for, the metaverse and the VR industry?
I'm not looking so much at specific models. I'm looking at capabilities. And where I'm really looking forward to it is the ability to dynamically synthesize environments. So that if you understand the tone, the emotional tone of an environment that you would like to explore or use as your basis for something else, then your ability to be transported into something that is reflective of that. Well beyond the simple visuals and the music generation and the text, I want to see world building come with it, so that a person can speak a world into being, or that it can be built around them from context cues that shapes that environment to their intent. And once you have that, then you've got movie sets, and you've got book settings, and you've got reading nooks, and you've got whatever you want to be transformative or transportive or creating safe environments for different kinds of personal or interpersonal exploration. I think that matters because that's going to be part of a genuine spatial computing interface. Is going to be when we delegate memory and function to objects in our environment, which we've always done this as executive functioning tools. We write things down so that paper can remember for us, and then we only have to worry about where the paper is or where you left your keys so that you can operate your car. All of these things are based in space. But when we can delegate more of that working memory and more of that function, when space can think back to us, then that object manipulation is delegation, not just of I need to remember where this is, but I have given this task to an agent who will accomplish some part of it on my behalf and come back to me with the results. I know that this will have been taken care of. I can dispatch my intent into my little fleet of digital flying monkeys to go do whatever it is that I need them to do, and then come back to me. And I think that level of understanding and intent and creativity, that's what I'm really looking forward to from the AI side of things, to help fill in those gaps so that you don't have to go through an extensive tedium of trying to design these interfaces for every conceivable outcome. You make them responsive and dynamic, and then you just have to provide context and an appropriate level of permissions, right? There are all of these endless stories. I mean, the earliest sci-fi stories are probably the golem in Middle Eastern tradition, which was a being of clay, and you wrote its purpose on a scroll and inserted that into the golem, and it would follow that direction. And most of the stories about these are those directions being misinterpreted, going wrong, or being carried too far, right? The cautionary tale of technology extends to pre-technological times because writing had power. And so we have the concepts of doing these things from time immemorial. I'm looking forward to bringing it into the present time and just feeling like a wizard.
Yeah, the funny thing is, you're talking about, directions being misinterpreted. You're talking about the genie, the genie situation in that in Mural. That's the telltale time as well. You tell the genie, I want to make $1 million, and all of a sudden you rob a bank for $1 million, right? You never explained how. So I can imagine someone trying to use AI and telling it to do something, and it takes the directions literal without people thinking through the consequences of those directions, right? So
there need to be safeguards, and there's a reason that Black Mirror is doing the kinds of things it's doing, and you need organizations like the EFF looking at the ACLU looking at rights and permissions and access constraints and safe design. There's a lot as a society that we need to figure out, and I will probably get there. You worry about the AI apocalypse or whatever, but it also matters. Well, what can the AI actually do? And right now, not much. They don't have any manufacturing capabilities. They don't have a fuel refinery capabilities. They don't have the ability. Even an autonomous vehicle still has to stop and recharge constantly. Yeah. And if you put a traffic cone on its hood, it's just going to sit there.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah.
Right. So we're a long way off from any kind of AI apocalypse. We've got time to figure it out. But I think, the social fabric side of things is what really matters.
Well, I think we're hitting
hopefully we don't have any Terminator happening anytime soon.
Not yet, Christian, not yet. But we're hitting that hour and a half mark. I know this could be a 4-hour episode if we let it be, but I think we'll probably wrap it up here. ptom, we're definitely going to have you come back and dive even deeper into the world of VR, the metaverse, Absolutely. AI, and all the applications. But we appreciate you for coming on. This was, I think, a fantastic episode for me. A lot of it went over my head, so I'm going to do a little bit more research and come ready with some more questions and ideas the next time. But with that being said, how can people find you? What's the best way to reach out to you or to speak to you? Is it LinkedIn, email? How would you prefer?
My website is stale, but ptom.net is a thing. You can email me. Anything at ptom.net will find me. LinkedIn is an easy way to go, and of course, links in the description.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep, we'll definitely link your website and LinkedIn in our description.
Yeah, but we appreciate you
again.
Thank you
guys so much. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, we look forward to the next one.
Oh, thank you.